But tonight's top story that's breaking at the moment, chorus now growing for DK Shivakumar as Karnataka Chief Minister within a section of the Congress there. 10 DKS camp MLAs have left for Delhi this evening and are expected to try and meet the Congress High Command tomorrow. The DK Shivakumar's camp one-line demand, honor the power sharing deal. Remember, 2.5 years is being completed of Siddaramaiah as Chief Minister tomorrow. And the DKS camp is claiming there was a 50-50 rotational deal. DKS camp is saying, in fact, that the leadership change was verbally agreed to in 2023. Chief Minister Siddaramaiah, though, has dismissed any reports of a November revolution and giving up the Chief Minister post. He says, I am still strong, will remain strong. So the Congress Nataka in Karnataka continues. Joining me now is Nagarjun Dwarkanath, our Southern India Bureau Chief. Nagarjun, what are you picking up? 10 MLAs coming to Delhi. Is this just a pressure tactic? Are they really serious? Do they have the numbers to try and force the High Command to take a decision on Chief Ministership in the Congress?
Well, DK Shivakumar and his camp members are not rather relying on the number of MLAs. They are rather relying on the promise that was made. The camp still claims that there was a verbal communication when in 2023, before the oath-taking ceremony, that after 2.5 years tenure, there will be a change of guard. The one demand that the DK camp members are now saying is, please honor your promise or keep up the word. That's all they're saying. They're not saying we have 100 MLAs, 70 MLAs, 140 MLAs. All they're saying is the High Command were a witness to what happened in 2023, and now is the time. And 10 MLAs have flown to Delhi, is what we are told, seeking time with KC Venugopal and Mallikarjun Kharge. More MLAs over the weekend are expected to fly to meet the party High Command. While we don't know
Nagarjun, this so-called promise was a verbal promise allegedly made by Sonia Gandhi to DK Shivakumar. So where is the question? We've seen in the past, Chhattisgarh, Rajasthan, this 2.5 years rotational chief ministership has never been adhered to. Is DK Shivakumar confident, or is he just hoping against hope, given that Siddaramaiah is saying, I'm going nowhere?
Well, politicians usually rely on the hope. DK Shivakumar is extremely hopeful, and his camp is also hopeful that the party High Command will not do the same thing what they did in Chhattisgarh as well as Rajasthan. And he also feels that it is not T.S. Singhdev and Sachin Pilot. It is DK Shivakumar they are talking to, because he's helped the party win in other state elections also. He has helped other Madhya Pradesh, Gujarat MLAs when they came to Karnataka.
Right.
And in the last election, he feels that along with Siddaramaiah, he had put in enough efforts to win the 2023 elections. And Sonia Gandhi herself had promised verbally. This is what the camp claims. But now what they're doing is it's optics and pressure tactics. Even though DK Shivakumar is not speaking out in public, his camp members have gone, of course, with the blessings of DK Shivakumar.
Okay, we're going to leave it there. Let's see how this plays out. But really, this has been a long-running battle for power, a power tussle in Karnataka. Tomorrow, 2.5 years of Siddaramaiah and DK Shivakumar hoping that he can take advantage of that moment. Appreciate, Nagarjun, you joining us. Okay, I want to turn from there to tonight's top story. Remember, the top story of the day comes today from the Supreme Court, where a 5-judge bench headed by Chief Justice B.R. Gavai pronounced its opinion advisory on the critical issue of whether a court can impose timelines on the president and state governors for acting on bills that are passed by state legislatures. The unanimous opinion was that the concept of deemed assent, that if a bill is there in place for months on end and not passed, is alien to the Constitution. The Supreme Court said that timelines cannot be imposed on the president or governors to decide on pending bills. However, if there is unreasonable time taken, the court could intervene in certain exceptional circumstances. What does this court verdict really mean for the powers of the court and indeed the jurisdiction of the legislature and that of the governor and president? It's our top story tonight.
A crucial clarification from the Supreme Court on how India's federal system must function. The Supreme Court's 5-judge Constitution bench, led by Chief Justice B.R. Gavai, has delivered its much-awaited view on a presidential reference made by President Draupadi Murmu under Article 143 of the Constitution. The judges have said the court cannot prescribe timelines for president and governor. But they add that while governors are not rubber stamps, they cannot sit stall bills endlessly. The court says actions of the governor are not justiciable, which means subject to trial, but adds that the court can give directions to the governor if there is prolonged inaction. The judges added that the concept of deemed assent used in the earlier verdict to pass the bills is alien to the constitution.
If there is an unexplained long delay, then the states will still have the right to challenge that delay in a court of law. What does this mean really for politics and law in this country is something we'll have to wait and see, because the governor and assembly standoff, especially in opposition ruled states, has not ended.
In April this year, a bench of Justice J.B. Pardiwala and Justice R. Mahadevan delivered a judgment in the state of Tamil Nadu versus the governor of Tamil Nadu case, in which the DMK government had accused Governor R.N. Ravi of withholding bills indefinitely. The court used its special powers under Article 142 of the Constitution to declare 10 withheld bills as deemed to have been assented on the date when they were presented to the governor. The legal fraternity was divided on the judgment, with some describing the verdict as judicial overreach.
He cannot withhold the bill without any reason. That is absolutely wrong, because he is not the king. He is only an appointed governor. If he thinks that he is a king, then it itself is against democracy. But this governor does not give any reason for withholding the bill.
In line of today's opinion, clarity is awaited on what happens to the earlier Supreme Court verdict. With Anisha Mathur, Bureau Report, India Today.
Well, let me go to my first guest on that big story. Former Attorney General of the country, who appeared as the senior advocate for Tamil Nadu when a two-judge bench had ruled that there could be timelines set for governors and presidents. Mukul Rohtgi joins us. What do you now make out of the Supreme Court five-judge judgment that effectively overrules what the two-judge bench said? It seems to suggest that any decision taken by the governor and president when it comes to withholding of bills is not subject to judicial review.
So, Rajdeep, first things first. This is what is called advisory jurisdiction. The very meaning of the word advise is that it is not binding either on the person who seeks the advice or even on courts. This is a special jurisdiction to advise or counsel. That's the first thing. This has been so held by the Supreme Court in a catena of judgments from Xavier's case downwards, though it is entitled to great weight, because it is nevertheless the wisdom of 5 or 9 judges of the Supreme Court. Second, in my view, this judgment creates more confusion than it seeks to clear. It says that there can't be a time limit set for the governor because no such time limit has been set in the Constitution. Well, that's literally true, but Dr. Ambedkar would be turning in his grave in as much as he would never have thought that governors will act in a partisan fashion all over the nation, will not act with wise counsel, and will delay things intentionally. That was not contemplated by Dr. Ambedkar. That is why there is no such time limit. It was meant that people would rise to the occasion, but sadly, things have fallen rather than rising in the last 75 years of the Constitution.
I may ask you, as a result of this judgment, what happens tomorrow if a governor chooses to sit indefinitely on a bill passed by the legislature, or the president doesn't give assent to a contentious piece of legislation passed by a state assembly? Is this judgment therefore creating the possibility of even more state-center conflicts and actually acting against the federal spirit?
Yeah, so now, Rajdeep, two things. One, on one hand, it says that there can be no restriction on the discretion of the governor He may act, he may not act, or he may choose one of the three courses available to him. On the other hand, it says that there is a window of quote unquote limited jurisdiction or limited judicial review on a case to case basis where a bench of the court may feel that the governor is inordinately delaying, then the court can, in a limited manner, issue a mandamus. Mandamus is a positive direction to do or not to do, or forbear from doing something. Now, once you have that window, then the discretion vests in the bench of the Supreme Court. Now, what is reasonable delay or inordinate delay can vary because it is a subjective term. I may say that 2 months or 1 month is inordinate. You may feel that even 3 months is not inordinate. Who will decide? It will be a benchmark set by the bench concerned. The bill placed before him is the will of the people. Let's not forget, the assembly is the will of the people. If they say the bill should be passed, it should jolly well be passed, unless there is a glaring error or a legal flaw in that bill. Because it can't be that the will of the people of the entire state is pitted against one person. The governor is, after all, one human being. Therefore, he should jolly well pass the bill. And if the bill is illegal, it's for the courts to strike it down. The
Right.
Constitution does not give him any power to hold back a bill because, in his wisdom, it is illegal or right or wrong. His discretion is very, very limited. So, at the end of the day, there is a window in this judgment. That window will be exercised as per the discretion or the view of the bench concerned. And every day you will have conflicting views. Somebody will say 1 month is too late. Somebody will say 3 months is not late. This is the
Right.
confusion which will be caused by this judgment. Now let me come back, a step back a little. I was a counsel for the state of Tamil Nadu in the earlier case, which was decided by a two-judge bench of the Supreme Court, headed by Justice Padiwala. He took the other view, namely that because of the reasons that I have mentioned, no individual can hold back and say, I will not decide or I will decide, whenever I want. In that case, more than 2 years had passed and the bills were still languishing. So the will of the people was being scuttled. So that bench, in its wisdom, set specific time limits, that if they
Yes.
don't act within those time limits, there will be a concept of deemed assent. Deemed assent is a it's a fiction of law. You have the concept of deemed consent and assent in various statutes in India. For example, in every municipal law, there is a deemed consent or assent. That if you apply for sanction of building plans for your house, and for 3 months or so, if the corporation does not reply at all, the consent or a sanction is deemed to be granted. They have applied that principle only because every public functionary is accountable to the people, whether it's a
So,
municipal authority, whether it's a governor or a chief minister. Everybody is accountable because the public is
so
supreme.
you're mentioning therefore accountability and will of the people again and again. Can I say, Mr. Rodgi, that this judgment, in your view, only sets back the entire concept of the will of the people being supreme in a democracy? Am I correct that an unelected governor is being given primacy over an elected legislature, and therefore you have a situation where the governor cannot intervene? You believe that the governor must clear what the legislature says. The Supreme Court says governor cannot be a rubber stamp. Uh, you're saying that a governor cannot withhold assent and the court must review it if he withholds it without giving adequate reasons. Am I correct?
Absolutely correct, because the will of the people is supreme. Nobody can hold it to ransom. And as I said, he is not the arbiter of whether it's lawful or unlawful. By and large, it is the courts which will decide. He can assent and say, well, this is the will of the people, unless it's an absurd bill or completely wrong. He will generally say, I've decided, granted assent. If somebody is dissatisfied, please go and challenge it in the courts. The courts are meant to hear a challenge, not the governor. So I would lean in favor of the two-judge bench judgment, which set down the timelines, even though it's a little extreme, but at times you require extreme measures for extreme situations, considering what is happening in the country.
Okay, Mukul Rohtgi is saying Ambedkar would be turning in his grave looking at this judgment. I appreciate you joining us. Strong words there from the former Attorney General. I want to widen this. This is an issue that goes to the heart of our constitutional democracy. Is the Supreme Court opinion of this five-judge bench to be treated as a judgment or an advisory? Should there really be timelines for presidents and governors to give assent to bills, or can they just sit on legislation? Will the Supreme Court ruling create more confusion? Is this a setback for the basic concept of federalism? Will governors' powers now only expand? Joining me now, Satyapal Jain, Additional Solicitor General, Justice Gyan Sudha Mishra, former Judge of the Supreme Court, and Dushyant Dave, Senior Advocate, Supreme Court, joins us at the moment. Mr. Dave, your first reactions. You heard Mukul Rohtgi saying Ambedkar would turn in his grave looking at this judgment. He claims Ambedkar believed governors would not be biased, but in an era of partisan governors, you need some checks and balances. Do you agree that timelines should have been set by the court? Governors cannot sit endlessly on legislation.
Rajdeep, first and foremost, I think this whole approach in filing this petition for review or presidential reference was absolutely improper. If the government was upset with the judgment of the two-judge bench headed by Justice Pardiwala and Justice Mahadevan, they could have filed a review. They could have then gone for a curative. But to come through backdoor like this and seek an opinion, which opinion, as Mr. Rohtgi rightly said, is not binding on anyone, makes no sense to me. Having said that, I must say that the opinion has thrown out the parliamentary democracy out of the window. It is something which is completely unacceptable. I mean, it is really surprising that the five learned justices have, interpreted the Constitution in such a narrow sense. Because ultimately, what is a bill? A bill in a state legislature is the will of the people. They have elected this legislature, the majority party. They have put majority party has now formed a government, and majority party has now piloted a bill. And that bill now is awaiting the assent from the governor. He can't sit over it even for a day or two.
What happens if the bill is bad? What happens, Mr. Dave, according to you, if the bill is bad in law? If it is seen to be prima facie a bill which is not as per the constitution of the country. According to the court, they are separating constitutional authorities. Governor's role, executive's role, legislature's role, court's role, all are being separated.
No, governor has no power to decide the merits of the bill. Whether it's constitutional or not, whether it is right or wrong, that's in the realm of the judicial review. And whoever is aggrieved by that bill has a right to challenge it. At the most, governor can send it back to the assembly for reconsideration. If assembly on reconsideration says that we accept this bill, then that's the end of the matter. In a given situation, governor has a power to send the bill to the president for advice. But governor must act, and he must act as soon as possible under Article 200. So as soon as possible, words have been completely lost sight of by the five learned judges. It means immediately. I mean, if English language is so clear. So I personally feel that, this judgment is frankly, one is not surprised at the judgment because today, judiciary is quite soft on the executive. But you look at, this concept has been considered by Supreme Court earlier in the past in some Singh and other cases where Supreme Court said that governor is only a figurehead and that governor must act in constitutional sense. Now, if he has to act in constitutional sense, he cannot forget for a second that he is not the elected representative. He is not, some kind of a monitor. He is only there to, be a link between the center and the state. That's all. So I feel that, the theory of checks and balances has been completely lost sight of. The Supreme Court has not only power, but duty to act. And having failed to act, if this opinion were to be, converted in tomorrow into a binding judicial decision, It would really be travesty of the justice. It will really make mockery of the constitution,
Okay.
constitutionalism.
You're,
And
you're, you're using also very strong words that you fear that this judgment could make a mockery of the Constitution. Satyapal Jain, you want a quick response and then I'll go to the judge. But Mr. Jain, the fact is that there was a two-judge bench which clearly laid out timelines based on the fact that the Tamil Nadu governor had sat for more than 2 years on bills. I mean, if you have governors sitting on bills for 2 years, it is a recipe for a potential flashpoint and a constitutional breakdown.
See, in my view, the judgment delivered by the Constitution Bench of the Supreme Court today is a very balanced judgment, balanced advice. It realizes the powers conferred on three different constitutional authorities of the country as envisaged by the Constitution of India. Let's not undermine the role of the governor simply to a rubber stamp. I'll just remind my friends, then all other functionaries, minister, MP, judges take oath. They take oath in the name that they will owe allegiance and faith to the Constitution of India. But when the governor takes oath, Article 159, I'll just read one line. He says, and will do the best of my ability, preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution and the law that, and I will devote myself to the service of the people. He is supposed to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution. So
But
therefore,
he's
it is the
also supposed to
constitutional
act on the
obligation.
aid and advice of the Council
Yes.
of Ministers.
See, aid and advice has also been clarified by the Supreme Court. Aid and advice is in a limited extent. So far as the constitutional matters are concerned, bills are concerned, if he was to act only on the aid and advice of the governor of the government, then what was the need of this oath? 159. What was the need of provision? Three provision in Article 200 of the Constitution of India, which gives three options to the governor. See, let's not undermine the role of the governor simply because some governor has been sitting over some issue for 1 year or 2 years. Nobody can justify that. I'm not going into that. The judgment says very clearly, number one, the governor is a constitutional authority. Powers have been vested in him under Article 200. The oath part 159 has not been discussed in the Supreme Court, which I am pointing today. They have preserved his right. If there is a delay, unnecessary delay, the Supreme Court has opened the way, kept the window open, that somebody can come to the court. Court cannot examine the wisdom of the governor. Cannot. This is what the judgment says. But in case
So
there is
the
a
court,
the office of the governor is not immune. So it's a very balanced judgment which
you're
gives
calling
power
it a
within their
balanced
own
judgment.
field to all
Others
the
are
authorities.
saying it's a mockery of the law. Two very clear
not
viewpoints.
at
I
all.
want to bring you Justice Gyan Sudha Mishra. It's an unusual situation, ma'am. You're a former judge of the Supreme Court. You've got a situation where a two-judge bench made it very clear there must be timelines before for any bills that are kept pending or withheld by a governor or president. You can't just indefinitely sit on bills. Now you've got the Supreme Court saying, no, we don't want to get into setting timelines for president and governors. They are constitutional authorities. We don't want to clash with them. Is there a balanced view, according to you, that the five-judge bench has taken, or are they effectively creating even more confusion?
The Constitution Bench judgment, in my view, is impeccably a balanced verdict that I, as a judge, could ever conceive of. It has diluted the extreme view that was taken by the two-judge bench, and it has given an absolutely balanced view that the judge, the governor cannot sit on the bills indefinitely, because you see, when the constitution, because there are situations when a legislation is enacted and the constitution was framed, one would never conceive of an extreme situation where the constitutional authority uh, would in some sense act beyond the boundaries without being conscious of the reasonableness of their action. But at times,
But ma'am, with due regard, you're looking at at a perfect situation. What is the reality? The reality is particularly governors in opposition-ruled states are in constant conflict with those state governments. In that situation, if a bill is being withheld, even though it's been passed by the legislature, should the court not intervene and set some kind of a reasonable timeline? How do you define a reasonable timeline?
Of course, that's a very tricky situation. But you see, whenever a situation of a complex nature or a complicated nature arises, I think the water seeks its own level is applicable to all institutions, including the courts. And when it is left open, even in the by the Keshwaran Bharti case, that even the basic features of the constitution can be can be subject to judicial review, then that constitution, this governor also is a part of the constitution and is the constitutional authority. So it is very difficult and rather impossible to list that what are the situations and what would be the timeline for the governor to act
But
to give
okay,
the consent.
so we've
So
got two of my guests saying it's a balanced judgment. Dushyant Dave, not for the first time, you're the outlier. But I just want to understand from you, therefore, look at it from the Supreme Court's point of view. They seem to have taken a step back because they fear that if they set timelines, they will effectively find themselves in an adversarial position vis-a-vis the executive potentially, or indeed the president or the governor. So they are playing safe. They don't want to rock the boat at the moment and create a confrontation, adversarial situation by saying, no, you have only 3 months to decide on a particular bill.
I think the judges, in a lighter vein, are trying to, protect themselves, because, as we all know, that judges across the board, Supreme Court, High Courts, and trial courts, take their own time in delivering judgments. Sometimes years after they have heard the matters, by which time they have forgotten what was really argued before them and what was the matter about. But anyway, having said that, let me say one thing: that the Article 200 is expressly clear. It only gives the option to the governor to either assent or to return as soon as possible. Now, if this is not a mandate, then what else is the mandate? You cannot, Mr. Jain is, with great respect, completely wrong in relying upon the oath. The Supreme Court judges also have a constitutional oath to uphold the Constitution. Their duty is to ensure that checks and balances are maintained between the executive, legislature, and they don't cross their path. That's the role of the judiciary. The judicial review of the executive action is the basic structure of the Constitution as per Supreme Court. Now, if therefore the governor, does not act, then is it expected that everybody should sit, waiting for the governor to clear? After all, every political party wins elections on the basis of their manifesto, their promises to the electorate, which are then many a times translated into, legislative bills, so that
Right.
those promises are fulfilled. Now, if governor were to sit for 2 or 3 or 4 years, that promise cannot be fructified, and the electorate will feel disappointed. So I think this is completely bizarre, absurd argument that governor can take his own time. No, governor is not imperium in imperio. He is under the Constitution, he is under the
I,
law, and
okay.
he is therefore bound to act as per the principles of Constitution and constitutionalism. He cannot
I,
just become a knight errant, as we have seen
you see,
they are
therefore, I take your point. You see, Satyapal Jain, the court is saying governor is not a rubber stamp, but neither can the governor act in a hyper-partisan way against the basic tenets of the Constitution, wherein legislatures are seen to be the will of the people. But that's exactly what's happening. You see, it's not just one Tamil Nadu. There are several cases in recent times where governors have sat on bills. West Bengal has seen it, Kerala has seen it, different opposition-ruled states have seen it. Therefore,
See, this
should
is
the court not have shown more courage and in a
this
way
is what
put
the
out a more
Supreme Court
courageous
says.
judgment? Is this a very soft judgment?
Rajdeep, no,
What you're
Supreme
saying is
Court has
balanced,
clarified
critics will say
exactly.
soft.
Supreme Court has clarified exactly the point that you are raising now. Supreme Court has kept a balance between all. The governor cannot sit indefinitely. The Supreme Court says so. And if he does it, somebody can come to the court of law. I give one example. Tamil Nadu is one extreme example. In case of Himachal Pradesh, the Himachal Vidhan Sabha passed an act about the appointment of the vice chancellors against the regulations of the UGC, against the Supreme Court judgment that the governor will choose one out of the panel prepared by the search and selection committee. The governor calls the CM, discusses with him, and they pass the bill again, which is against the constitution. In Punjab, when Banwarilal Purohit was the governor, certain bills were passed by the Punjab Vidhan Sabha, which were totally
Right.
against the constitution. The Punjab Vidhan Sabha passed a resolution condemning the certain concession given by the union government to the employees in Chandigarh. When Captain Amrinder was the Congress High Chief Minister, they passed a bill cancelling all the agreements enacted by the state earlier. So there
Okay.
are certain situations where the governor has to apply his mind and to protect, preserve, and defend the constitution. He
I'm going
needs
to leave it.
time to think over it.
I'm going to, we've heard two very clear points. Justice, you want to say something to the lawyers, ma'am? Is there a word you would say? Judges now find each of their comments being discussed on social media, being targeted. Does that make life of a judge more difficult?
I think it's for the sitting judges to take the call on this question, because we were at a time when there was no social media. So we were largely protected. But yes, I think when we take oath, when the judges take oath
Right.
to be dispassionate, then being, by a, I would say, disgruntled elements, they go to the extent of, I don't know, mudslinging and chappal slinging and whatnot. So, but fortunately, uh, the lawyers with experience and whether I should be saying in substance, because they also act
Right.
objectively and dispassionately. They fortunately they don't go to that extremes, and that's a very fortunate sign. And
So the operate, so I think at the end of the day, judgments need to be debated without necessarily personal allegations being made. But judgments do need to be debated. Judges are not above the law, and neither should be governors in this country. No one should be above the law, and hopefully this
Constitution
Supreme
is
Court
supreme,
judgment,
not
rather
anybody
than give
individual.
immunity
Rule
to
of law
judges,
is supreme,
rather than give
Constitution is
immunity to governors, must send out a much stronger signal to governors. That's the hope, and ummeed pe duniya kayam hai. I appreciate my guests joining me here on my big talking point. I want to turn from there to the other big story that's developing at the moment, because there's been a major development in Jammu today. Kashmir Times, one of the valley's oldest newspapers, is now under investigation. The Jammu and Kashmir police today raided its Jammu office as what it says is part of a probe into alleged dissemination of terror-related content. The state investigating agency says it has recovered AK-47 cartridges, pistol rounds and 3 grenade levers during the raid. The FIR alleges that the media house has disseminated terrorist and secessionist ideology, spread inflammatory content, radicalized youth, incited disaffection, disturbed public order. Executive editor Anuradha Bhasin has been named. Editors now have condemned the raid as an attempt to silence independent journalism, calling the allegations an intimidation tactic. People's Democratic Party leader Iltija Mufti has called the raid preposterous, an example of state high-handedness. And so has the Kashmir Times, claiming it's an attempt to silence them because they are telling truth to power. Joining me now is Iltija Mufti, the PDP leader, joins me. Appreciate your joining us. Iltija, you've taken a very strong stand on this raid that has been conducted at Kashmir Times, saying it's an attempt to silence the voices of free press. But according to the police, they have found cartridges there and they found guns there, and therefore they are claiming that they had every right to raid the office of Kashmir Times.
Well, Rajdeep, I want to point out a few things which you might not be aware of. I think you're oblivious of. First of all, the Kashmir Times office, which was raided by the SIA today, has not been operational for the past 4 years. Most of the operations of Kashmir Times has been all digital and online. So how did they suddenly find all this evidence, this cache of, ammunition or guns, if it's not been operational for the past 4 years? Second of all, we've seen how in the years since the illegal abrogation of Article 370, there has been a vicious crackdown on free independent speech in Kashmir. Kashmir Times is not the only portal that's been targeted. You had Kashmir Wala, which was run by Fahad Shah, who was booked under UAPA or PSA, I'm not sure. He was jailed for 1.5 years. You had the Kashmiriyat, which also recently recently shut down its operation. So in Kashmir, we're seeing how newspapers that are acting as, that they're doing propaganda for the Indian government, for the BJP, they are being given ads, they're earning a lot of revenues, but it's portals like Kashmir Times, Kashmir Wala, Kashmiriyat, which is being punished for speaking truth to power. And let me point out the second thing. We saw in the Bhima Koregaon case how evidence was planted, on laptops as well. So I won't be surprised if all of this has been orchestrated, because this points out to a very big discrepancy.
That is your
if
belief.
Kashmir
You
Times,
see,
the office,
when you say
was not
this
operational
is
for the
being
past 4 years,
orchestrated,
how did they suddenly
and
find
the
this
Kashmir
ammunition?
and the police has gone on record,
guns?
ma'am. The police, this is not sources. The police has gone on record claiming they have recovered cartridges. How are you going to square it? Are you saying that the police has planted this evidence on Kashmir
I'm sorry,
Times?
but I'm not gonna trust. No, I don't trust the police here anymore, Rajdeep. There was an explosion in the Naugam police station last week. 4,000 kilograms of ammonium nitrate exploded on its own. And the police constables who were injured, who I visited, also pointed out how it was extremely strange for this ammunition to blow up on its own. This ammunition was taken in the middle of the city, in the heart of the city. It was kept in a police station, in the Naugam police station, which is densely populated, and it suddenly imploded on its own. I'm not pointing out fingers, at the police, but I'm saying that we've seen, even in the Bhima Koregaon case, how evidence was planted.
No,
and
but
it's
why
well
don't you
documented
wait?
how there's been a vicious crackdown on the...
Iltija Mufti, you have perfectly valid reasons to perhaps raise your voice, but the question is, and raise concern, but the question is, this is an ongoing investigation.
There is a very strong culture
Just
in
a minute, ma'am.
Kashmir
It's
since
an ongoing
2019.
investigation into the Red Fort blast, which took place only last week. 13 people, just a minute, ma'am. 13 people died. The police, both in Delhi and Jammu and Kashmir, are carrying on the investigations. Now, if you say during the course of the investigation that all of this is being orchestrated, or you suggest that the police is out to get Kashmiris, that every Kashmiri is now being suspected to be a terrorist, effectively there will be those who are saying you are undermining the police operations.
There is a very clear crackdown on each one of us, whether it's a politician, whether it's a political party, whether you're a journalist, whether you're an activist. What about Khurram Parvez? He's been languishing in Tihar for the past 2 years. He's been feted by the United Nations for his work as far as human rights violations and abuses is concerned. So it's just not about journalists, Rajdeep. This is what I'm trying to explain to you. Since 2019, we've been yelling from rooftops that nothing in Kashmir is normal. The kind of normalcy that they've achieved today, you have doctors, apparently they've unearthed a network of doctors who were trying to blow themselves up. What does that tell you? That nothing is normal here. But nobody wants to listen to us.
It also
Instead,
tells you the dangers of terror. Ma'am, it also tells you the dangers of white-collar terror. A doctor blowing himself up and a network or a module of doctors is very, very deeply troubling, surely. It shows a radicalization taking place among so-called white-collar professionals.
Of course it's troubling. Of course, it's extremely troubling. It's perturbing for me as a Kashmiri citizen, as a Kashmiri Indian. It's extremely baffling that a doctor, a medical professional who is supposed to save lives is instead turning into a fidain where he wants to be a suicide bomber. But I have questions to ask BJP. What kind of normalcy have you achieved? Is there radicalization in Kashmir of a few Kashmiris? Yes, but they're a handful. They're not the majority population. I have said this. Even when we spoke in April, I told you that Kashmiris do not condone terrorism. They condemn terrorism. Just because if a handful of Kashmiris decide to indulge in such heinous acts does not mean that all of us are terrorists, but we have to trace the roots. We've seen that there's rampant Islamophobia. BJP has been using Muslims to kind of like earn votes to win election after election. There's a vicious cycle where there's Islamophobia because of which there is counter-radicalization in Kashmir.
You see, there are two issues. There is your concern, ma'am, over Islamophobia and the targeting of Kashmiris as terrorists. But there is also, ma'am, just a minute. There is also those who are concerned about that the police must be allowed to function with some element of independence. Today you are saying you don't trust the Kashmir police. Now, are you saying that the Kashmir police itself
Rajdeep, since 2019...
Yes, go
Since
ahead.
2019, the only thing that the police here has done, the only thing that they've been engaging in is crackdowns, whether it's by CIK, whether it's by SIA, it's stifling of dissent, it's arresting people, it's banning books, it's arresting people, it's arresting journalists like Fahad Shah, it's arresting activists like Khurram Parvez, it's arresting politicians. It's, arresting even an MLA from our party who was booked under UAPA because they speak truth to power. The police, out of all the agencies here, has had full freedom to do what they want. And if these blasts were carried out, God forbid, whose responsibility is it? It's the police's responsibility. But are we seeing heads roll? No. It's only the media that's talking about कि terrorism है, radicalization है. तो responsibility किसकी है? 2019 के बाद तो यहाँ statehood आपने हमसे ले लिया, 370 ले लिया, UT बनाया है, police comes under MHA. आप उनको ये सवाल क्यों नहीं पूछ रहे हैं कि कश्मीर में इतना radicalization क्यों हो गया है? कि एक डॉक्टर एक वीडियो बनाता है कि I would rather be a suicide bomber. They are not only distorting what Kashmiriyat is, they're distorting, they're hijacking Islam. These people are not Muslims. They're a blot on humanity. They're a blot on Muslims. But we have been telling you since 2019, there is no normalcy in Kashmir. You need to talk to the people of Jammu and Kashmir. And I'm telling you today, Rajdeep, you have to reach out to the youth of Kashmir. It is extremely appalling, puzzling that a youngster here, a doctor who is a medical professional, who is supposed to save lives, is going all the way to Delhi with all these explosives and he wants to blow himself up. There is an acute
but you agree,
problem,
and I'll ask you this, but you agree that cannot justify.
Of course, I agree that there's radicalization.
You agree the police's job is to crack down on anyone who is associated with any terror group. So the police must be allowed to do what the police is supposed to do, ensure, maintain law and order. A quick answer.
Are you suggesting that Anuradha Bhasin, Rajdeep, that Anuradha Bhasin, a journalist with impeccable values, has anything to do with terrorism? And mind you, she's not even a Muslim. Agar Musalman hoti to abhi tak aapne unko jail mein bhi dal diya hota. Have you seen the Kashmir Times? Have you seen their excellent reportage? After Article 370 was abrogated, she wrote a best-selling book, A Dismantled State. Are you telling me that she's associated with terrorism? Are you telling me Khurram Parvez was a terrorist? He's been languishing in Tihar jail for the past 3 years. The problem here is essentially that the Jammu Kashmir police is out here. They are cracking down on everybody, whether that's a politician, whether that's a Wahid Parra, whether that's a
You make
Khurram
that point,
Parvez,
ma'am.
whether that's
You're
an Anuradha Bhasin. They don't spare
You're claiming
anybody.
that human rights violations are being violated, that there is no rule of law being followed, that this is a crackdown against anyone who dissents or tells truth to power, and therefore you believe this is a completely unconstitutional act.
Yes,
we'll wait and see how that
absolutely.
Kashmir Times story develops, whether this
Absolutely,
is, as
Rajdeep.
some are suspecting, an attempt to intimidate the media, or is it part of a larger investigation into allegations of terrorism being made. Certainly lots of questions there for the police also to answer as part of their so-called crackdown. Iltija Mufti, appreciate you joining me here on the news today. Let's turn to tonight's Get Real India story, where a controversial move by the Nashik Municipal Corporation is sparking outrage across the city. This is a proposal to cut down nearly 1,800 trees to make way for a Sadhu Gram ahead of the Kumbh Mela in Nashik next year. It's drawn sharp objections from both environmental groups and local residents. While the corporation there insists that only trees under 10 years old will be removed, activists are warning of severe long-term impacts on Nashik's climate and air quality. Take a look at tonight's Get Real India story, a classic clash between environmentalists and those who believe that the Kumbh Mela must get primacy.
A controversial move by Nashik Municipal Corporation has sparked outrage among citizens and environmentalists alike. The corporation's proposal to cut down nearly 1,800 trees in Tapovan to set up a Sadhu Gram for Sadhus and Mahants for the upcoming Kumbh Mela has led to objections.
कुंभ कुंभ मेला ये हमारा भारत के हाँ श्रद्धा की बात है और ये हमारा भारत के नागरिक नहीं सिर्फ बाहर के नागरिक आके देखेंगे। हम क्या बताएंगे उन लोग का कि हम पेड़ काट के हम ये सभ्यता दिखा रहे हैं।
Environmental groups are calling for an immediate halt, pointing out that trees like Kadunimb, Tamarind and Jambhol are being marked for removal. They warn that this could have severe long-term effects on Nasik's climate and air quality.
ये जो 1800 झाड़ जो महानगर पालिका कह रही है कि हम तोड़ेंगे साधुग्राम बसाने के लिए, हम इसका निषेध कर रहे हैं और एक भी झाड़ टूटना नहीं चाहिए।
The municipal corporation, in a bid to calm public unrest, has clarified that only trees under 10 years will be affected. But questions remain: how can the age of these trees be verified? And can this destruction really be justified? With protests intensifying, the final decision will be made after a public hearing. With Praveen V. Thakre, Bureau Report, India Today.
Get real India there. Okay, let's turn from there to something happier. Our good news today story. In the arid hills of Bihar's Gaya district, where generations have struggled with poverty, one man's relentless efforts have turned the tide. For 3 decades, Laungi Majhi, once called crazy by locals, has been carving canals, building reservoirs, bringing life-saving water to villages. Today, his work has transformed barren lands into fertile fields. Take a look at tonight's Good News Today story.
In Bihar's Gaya district, where poverty forced generations to migrate, one man has spent 3 decades carving life out of mountains. His name is Laungi Majhi. Years ago, villagers called him Pagal or crazy, but today he's known as the Canal Man.
पागल तो अभी तक भी कहवे करते हैं। अभी भी लोग पागल कहते हैं, झूठ के काला भिड़ रहते हैं। अब उठते हैं सवेरे से और इधर भिड़ जाते हैं।
When administration looked away and opportunities dried up, this man from Kothilwa village kept digging alone. Laungi, who belongs to the Bhuiya Mushahar Mahadalit community, pierced hills, building small reservoirs, carving canals and bringing water to villages. Today, farmers in these villages grow vegetables, paddy and wheat.
तो एक गया में दशरथ मांझी हुए और दूसरे आपके भाई हुए।
जी हाँ, अब इनको दोबारा से देखिए, बहुत कुछ लोग करने लगा और बहुत कुछ कर भी लिए, बहुत फायदा भी आदमी को हो गया है।
At 70, Laungi is building the last canal of his life. This will take water to 10 more villages. But this time, he says he wants his majdoori or wages.
अंतिम प्रोजेक्ट है आपका
ये? हाँ, ये अंतिम बार है। ऐसे एक करके और जाना है ढूंढा पानी उसमें इस वक्त में करना नीचे है एक से नीचे है और वो नहीं तेल देना है। हाँ हाँ, वही
कहाँ जाएंगे इसको करके?
इसको हाकिम समझिए मजूरिया मांगा फिर देखा यह सब फर्शा भी जोतेला, ये सब जोतेला फर्शा भी। हाँ
ठीक।
His family worries, but Laungi refuses to stop.
हम लोग को तो बहुत खराब लगता है, मगर बोलता है कि हम तुम लोग को खराब लगे तो लगे, मगर हमको खराब नहीं लगेगा, हम जो करे हैं वही करेंगे।
Villagers say the nation must finally recognize him. Despite transforming entire regions, Laungi still struggles to save money to buy a new crowbar or a pair of slippers. But he carries on. Because for Bihar's canal man, this isn't madness. This is a mission. With Amit Bhardwaj, Bureau Report, India Today.
This country keeps going because of people like this who make society a better place to live in. I want to leave you with two images tonight. The first image is of the one and only Nitish Kumar, took oath as Bihar Chief Minister today for a record 10 times. Apart from Nitish Kumar, a total of 26 ministers, including 2 BJP deputy ministers, Samrat Chaudhary and Vijay Sinha, were sworn in. The ceremony was attended by Prime Minister Modi and other senior leaders of the NDA in what was a show of strength for the ruling NDA. Nitish Kumar is one of our images of the day, one of the most durable politicians that we've seen in this country.